and welcome to the Unhinged
Give or
History
take.
Podcast, the podcast where two people compulsively interrupt each other and just
Sorry.
frantically consume history stories and then come join forces, tell each other the history stories, and continue to interrupt each other because we're friends,
That's what friends do.
right?
That's how you know they care.
hmm And then they go, oh, okay, yeah, but go back. You were going to say something. Okay, but no, just
I'm
one more
sorry, like
thing.
5 minutes ago you said, and I think that maybe I need help.
Yeah.
Yeah,
hmm
that's us.
So I'm
That's
Theresa,
Theresa.
and that's Angie.
I'm Angie.
And we're
We're on a roll
83
already.
episodes in, and you know what? Look, if you're looking for a polished podcast with a standout script where it has been just gone over and gone through corporate communications to ensure that it is in the corporate voice, that's not here. This ain't
I was
it.
gonna say that's not us.
No,
I'm not even gonna apologize. That's never gonna be us.
no. And we don't want it to be.
It wouldn't be fun.
We're here for us, and you're here too. So come and hang. We're gonna have a good time,
Yeah,
you know? That's really what we're here
weirdos.
for.
Pretty much.
But we're all weirdos. And if your crazy plays well with our crazy, then come join in the sandbox.
You can come sit with us.
Yes. If you've got nothing nice to say about anyone else, come sit next to me.
I love that for us.
I kind of want to dive in because I have
Let's go.
the unhingedest of unhinged tales. The
I'm
unhinginess, the most
I like
unhinged.
the hunt. No, you know what? The most unhinged makes is obviously correct, but I like unhingedest. Let's go with
Yeah.
that.
Okay. Okay, so I have a story that was recommended to me on LinkedIn of all places because
Because
facts.
why not?
I know. So a dude I'm connected with named Josh Neal, I had like kind of said, hey, what unhinged history stories kind of keep you awake at night and live rent free in your brain? And he said, look up the Children's Crusade of 1212. And I went, those words don't make sense in a sentence next to each other. The sentence might make sense if it were a lot longer with lots more words in
Or a
between.
lot shorter.
Yeah, like we can either add to or subtract from, but as is, I'm going to say, what?
Yeah, agreed.
Okay. So, I ended up finding a bunch of podcasts on this. So I said, let the audio teach Teresa. So I have several sources from there. I have got The History of the Crusades, episode 81, The Children's Crusade, Byzantium and the Crusades, The Second Age of Crusaders, episode 6, The Children Crusade of 1212, and Gone Medieval has Life on Crusade. I then went to history.com because the Park Service wasn't bringing us any realness. And they have an article,
Devastating.
isn't it? Probably because it wasn't
Yeah.
on
American
US land.
soil.
That would help, right? Where they're like, you know what? We just don't have a monument there. So kick rocks. Um,
You know, we should start including the UNESCO. Oh my gosh.
UNESCO.
Ro- Thank you.
Yep,
In my
I'm here.
brain, it was braining. Anyway, we should start incorporating their sites as well.
I'll start working on it. We'll see what we can do. But their article is The Disastrous Time Tens of Thousands of Children Tried to Start a Crusade. Kings and popes told the young warriors for God to go home, but they persisted by Aaron Blakemore. Now, if that's not a title that gives the end away, I don't know what is. So hopefully you forget all of those words.
Um,
And I'm not repeating it. So
don't because I just cannot wait for you to dip in, you know?
yeah, this is so one of the
Yeah.
things I learned that I think I kind of knew, but hadn't had somebody fully like say all of the words in the sentence is that children in the 1200s in Europe, when do you think they're considered an adult by? Let's just do some back and forth here.
12.
By age 7, they're expected to get a job. or to support the family or join a monastery or move into the next phase of their adulthood, like go to the apprenticeship that they're
At
going to go
7.
at first grade.
At first grade, both of my children were still figuring out how to tie their own shoes, not being blacksmiths.
Yeah,
Not that they couldn't, but, you know.
my priorities were not pee the bed, be able to read the books I wanted to read without having to ask my mom how to find the dictionary or the word in the dictionary, and then to make
Mm-hmm.
sure that I got to my cartoons on Saturday morning,
Facts. Yeah, that's pretty much covers it.
right?
Snack. Snack of
Oh,
choice.
yeah, snack. Who has the good fruit snacks? Because there's
Exactly.
one good fruit snack brand. Um, yeah, but they were able, thankfully, they reserved marriage for the ripe old age of 14.
Oh, they are old at
Yeah,
14.
I know. By 8 or too late, but here we are.
Wow, I'm so glad I didn't marry at 14.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks for that.
you're welcome. That's what I'm here for. Um, it was set up to where if a kid age 7 was arrested, they were basically tried as an adult and could be executed.
I hate that for them.
I know. I mean, could you imagine a 7-year-old and you're looking at him like you're grown. How? Mentally? Physically? What yardstick are we using? I don't see it. Anyhow, but to set us up,
The only yardstick that I can think of is the shortened time span, like lifetime span that you could measure by. But even still, like a 7 is 7.
yeah. Now, to kind of position us in history, give us a bit more context. Um, Pope Urban II orders the First Crusade in 1095, and all of the religious wars, the Crusades themselves, they are dependent upon approval from the church. So at various times, the popes are going to call on the religious believers in Europe to head to the Holy Land to stomp out the Muslims. And these Christian crusades, sponsored by the Catholic Church, continue into the 1400s. Okay. You covered Eleanor of Aquitaine. She goes on the crusade to save her marriage in 1147, as disastrous as that was. Um, and then we have the First Crusade, the one that Pope Urban II calls for, and that's basically a ragtag group of humans that went out and attacked. Now they're kind of the first group that do this, and everybody else is a bit more.
I'm so sorry. You said I know you just talked about us interrupting, but would you refer to them as a ragtag group of humans? All I could think of is a D&D game now.
I mean,
Who's the orc?
there's a ton of bards, a couple paladins,
A few rogues, for
definitely a
sure.
few rogues.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't see mentions of orcs, but I can guarantee the other three were there.
The fact that you called them a ragtag group of humans makes me suspect there are other species out there involved.
I cannot
Carry on.
confirm nor deny.
Alternate timeline.
Now, the future crusades, they were apparently a bit different. You didn't have the pores out there attacking. Now, that is the incredible thing because you needed to be able to fund your own trip. You got to pay to go to
Facts.
camp.
Mm-hmm.
And the journey's expensive. If you're going to walk by land, you need to have the ability to forage or buy food every time you get to a tavern or stay at a tavern, all of those bits. And if you're going to take a boat, that passage just got extremely pricey. And no one wants to pay for a freeloader.
Usually, yeah.
I mean, that's just the facts of life.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in the Gone Medieval podcast, they talk about it basically being, I'm bastardizing what they said, but a themed vacation where you go on it, but you go for the experience, right? You're going to have this
Right.
kind of dark tourism moment, and you come back with street cred and a little
Of
bit of
course.
religious cred. because you
Yeah,
did
yeah, yeah.
you killed for the Lord.
So now you are can't think of the word. Anyway, you're blessed, but that wasn't what I was gonna say. Anyway, carry on.
A vindicated murderer.
There you are. You're justified in your
Sanctified.
actions.
Yeah.
There you go.
Now we've got this religious fervor around the Crusades that is just rippling all throughout Europe. And so we're going to fast forward to 1212 when a 12-year-old crusader named Stephen of Cloyes approaches the King of France. And he's got a
Okay.
group of followers behind them. They're tired, they're hungry, they're thirsty. And Stephen, all of 12, he's a shepherd, and he tells the king that Jesus Roosevelt Christ handed him a letter to gather the forces and to head to the Holy Land. And because this group of kids is going to overthrow the Muslims living there.
Okay.
Now, Stephen's followers are children, and children is in quotation marks, because there's a Latin word that they use that I won't butcher because I'm not brave enough today. And the word translates to kids, but it's not kids per se. It's children, but it's also, it could also mean, like, in the South, how they go boy.
Uh-huh. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay. So also, same, same. So it could be the poors, the lesser thans, and the children.
Yes, yes. Okay.
Okay. So it's children and. Now, the king, he's not going to sign off on this. The church
I
didn't
mean, you would hope
sanctify it.
so.
He's not going to fund a bunch of 12-year-olds and people who'd follow a 12-year-old to go stomp out Muslims.
This is feeling very Peter Panish.
You're not wrong because these people don't even have weapons. They have crosses and banners
You could use those to poke some people.
and the optimistic assumption that once they get to the Holy Land, they could convert the Muslims with persuasion and divine intervention, like you do.
Of course,
That's
like
how it
you
happens,
do.
like you do.
Okay,
Um,
like
they
you
also
do.
they also know that they are going to they're in France. So they're going to walk to Marseille. They're going to go to the ocean, and then the Lord is going to part the seas and they are going to just walk to the Holy Land,
Like you
which
do.
seems more problematic because there's less villages at the bottom of the ocean en route to the Holy Land, and that's not an instantaneous trip.
What?
And when they get to the Holy Land, they're going to fight fully grown, trained men who have home field advantage
That are armed and have been
with
training their entire lives.
they've got more than optimism and crosses.
In fact, they do, yes.
So that happens. Now, the events that are described here are kind of a form of mass hysteria, if you will, because Stephen of Cloy and the others head to Marseille intent on crossing the Mediterranean to get to the Holy Land. And if you had to guess, how many people do you think this 12-year-old roped into this?
Okay, so this could be anywhere between 30 and 300.
30,000.
Holy crap. My first guess was going to be 30,000. And then I was like, no, 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 no. There's somewhere in there, there's got to be a voice of reason. So it's got to be less than that. Okay. Wow.
I'd
All
love to
right.
tell you that. Now, historians basically say that, when in doubt, the Middle Ages, like they just kind of padded the number. So they highly doubt it's near that. Um,
Okay.
but they said the boy could preach, that he was just gifted, a brilliant orator. Now,
Okay. So Hamilton, we're looking at you.
a little bit, and he's not gonna, oh, what
Blow a
is
shot.
blow it there? Okay, thank you. Thank you. Because you
He's
said
not
that,
he's
like,
not
I
giving up
said
his
that and I was
shot.
like, ooh, I forgot it all. I need to go watch it. Um, so they get to Marseille and they've heard him preach. They get there and everyone is super excited to see the ocean's part. And we're gonna do it tomorrow. We're gonna do it tomorrow. We're gonna have a good night. Get some good
Okay.
get some good grub that we can forage into our bellies, and then we'll go. And they get there and they're expecting a miracle. And when it doesn't happen, they all feel really terrible and downtrodden. But it's fine because some captains kind of see these kids all deep in their feels and they decide to take mercy on them and offer to give them free boat rides to the Holy Land. So the
Oh,
children,
well, okay.
yeah, like this actually sounds like it's checking out for them, right? Like God is
Yeah.
providing. So they all get on the
And he
boat.
did preach.
He did preach. Now,
Yeah.
during the journey, at least one boat goes down because there's a massive storm and everybody on that boat dies.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
Now, the storm clears and they find themselves surrounded by Saracen traders who'd coordinated with the boat captains to buy the cargo of the boats.
Children,
Yeah. Sold all the kids into slavery.
of course.
So, if anything seems too good to be true,
They would be the those who coined that term.
yeah, yeah. Now, we get an account that's given to us 18 years after this event. There's a priest who was young and was traveling along with the kids. He was grown and a priest, but still young, right? Just like you can look back 18 years and go, I was young. But he finds himself among the group that sold into slavery, and he credits himself as lucky because he can read and write. So when he's sold, he's shipped off to Alexandria and then eventually gets out of slavery and makes his way back and then gives the church this account of what happened to all of the children. Now,
Deep breath.
what would you do if I told you that there was a another children's crusade at the exact same time?
I wouldn't be surprised at this point. You just told me about the first one, so a second one can't be off the table.
I mean, I was not expecting to. I really feel like this is a bizarre turn, but there's a German contingent.
Well, why wouldn't there be, Teresa?
Why would there be was mine, but here we are. So there's another group of believers that gather around what is now Germany. There is Nicholas of Cologne. We don't know a ton about him, but he assembles his own group of followers and reports that an angel told him to start a crusade, not Christ himself, who handed him a letter. Now,
Hmm.
where Stephen wanted glory in battle, Nicholas wants to just convert them to Christianity. So less bloodshed, more just,
Typically.
have you heard about my Lord and Savior Jesus? Don't run from the Lord.
Do you have a minute to talk about your car's extended warranty?
Pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
Now, they don't really know how these groups influenced each other. It seems strange that this happened in a vacuum where they didn't have some sort of knowledge that the other one was doing something.
Well, I mean, to be fair, some of them are sold into slavery, so they might not know.
Well, but prior to, like the leavings,
Yeah, I
this is
guess
the
that's
same
true.
year. You know what I mean? And France isn't wildly far away from Germany, but it's not the
True.
next door. You know what I mean? Like it's not the next county over. It's not the next town.
Yeah,
There's a
okay.
language barrier. There's mountains. Like this is fascinating to me. But either way, Nicholas also had tens of thousands of kids and adult followers, and they follow him over the Alps into Jerusalem
This is very Sound of Music-y.
with less Nazis. Now, as Nicholas and his flock head over the Chile Alps, they are, to go with the sound of music, they're singing hymns and eagerly awaiting the conversion of the Muslims, but they're also becoming exhausted and hungry because they're hiking through the Alps.
Mm-hmm. And
Now,
we've already determined snack is at the top of any 7-year-old's list.
right. Now, I think in one of the sources it said about a third of them died on the trip over the Alps.
Ugh. Okay.
And, that's unfortunate. And when they arrive in Genoa, Italy, they face a language barrier and annoyed town people who don't want to play host to ragtag religious kids. They didn't sign
What?
up for BVS. This is not the Vacation Bible School site. This is not their place. They're not here
They
for
did
it.
not fill out the forms. We did not pretend participate in games. We didn't bring snack, none of it.
They somehow appear before Pope Innocent III.
Okay.
And he's like, I did not sanction this. This quest of yours that you're on, I did not give it to you. This
I
is,
didn't sign this off.
yeah,
This is not my
no,
department.
no, this isn't the quest. Now,
Hmm.
he's like, look, love the enthusiasm. It's fantastic. Um, but maybe you should just go home because you're a bit you got to be this tall to ride the ride to go on the Crusade, and you're not 48 inches yet. So maybe if you stood on your parents' pocketbook and could afford the trip, we would take you, but you're not tall enough yet.
Ugh. Devastating. So they went and got higher tennis shoes.
Yeah. Now it's a humiliating blow. They break up. Now some integrate into Genoa, and later the great houses in Italy, some of them say that they date back to these kids that were part of this children's crusade. And some return home, but we know that Nicholas isn't in the mix. He's not one of the ones that get back home. And when the parents of the kids realize that their kids aren't coming home because why did you think they had a return ticket? The parents
Um,
get upset. They blame Nicholas's father, who egged him on for ego purposes, and they call for Nicholas's father to be executed since he stirred things up and get them to transpire.
I just really feel like making him foot the bill to get the kids home would be a better idea.
But I think
Unless, of
it's
course, he's poor, so he can't
yeah,
afford it in the first place. Yeah.
right. And I think that there's a couple of things. First off, a third of the kids died on the way there.
Yeah, let's figure out which kids those parents belong to first.
Right. And then let's understand that maybe them coming back home. I just there's a lot about this whole story where I'm like, why did you assume that they could come? They were going to
On
seven
a
miles
crusade.
was a world away at this time.
Yeah.
Now, apparently not everyone is enthusiastic about these crusades. They have these so-called holy children who are motivated by this religious fervor, and they take the same vow internally that the papal crusaders are going to take, right? But the crazy part is that both boys had the ability to drum up this support because they're young. They're like 12 apiece, right? And this ends up terrifying the local clergy just on the whole. And the fact that it happened in two different locations, that kind of makes people a bit nervous because they can't get people to put more money in the hat. And young Nicholas can get people to march through mountains.
I mean, when you have the skill set, you have the skill set.
Facts. They just needed to, absorb him into the monastery a little bit earlier on. Maybe not let Stephen go play
Mm-hmm.
out with the sheep and the wolves. Maybe he needed a little bit more guidance. But instead, these two boys are labeled fanatics, and their
Of
mystical
course.
mission to the Holy Land, even though it intrigued their followers, kind of deal. They believe that they held their followers captive with or spellbound with sermons, songs, and promises of miracles. And they say that Nicholas was so enthralling that he's been called the legend for the Pied Piper of Hamelin.
Okay, that's really interesting.
Isn't that? Now, even though there's multiple accounts that discuss both Stephen and Nicholas, historians still disagree on many of the Crusades in particular. So there's a text by Peter Retz in 18 or 1977. He reassesses that the Children's Crusade basically existed on the margins of society, and that it was a combination.
Yes, I can't really see it being a mainstream thing.
Right.
Like, Even then, but still, yeah.
Right. Like, even if you're part of one of the royal retinue who are going, you're not mainstream. If you're a gutter snipe,
Yeah.
you're not mainstream.
Yeah.
So he's just basically like, there's a bunch of poor and marginalized people, and they just kind of rally under the flag of Christianity because it's kind of what Christ wanted to begin with. Um, and they kind of do this up on their own as after the first crusade goes through. And then he says that they weren't like I was saying earlier, they weren't necessarily all children, but they're poor people. And so he calls for a reinterpretation of the crusade as a whole because it puts the movement into question by, basically the you boys. What are you boys up to at this time of night?
Mm-hmm.
So with a lot of this, we really don't have a ton of in-depth details. What we don't really know if they're like tons of actual kids and their ages. We didn't do like a full-blown like intake form, everybody hold hands, by age and go through. Or if they're
Right.
just more powerless peasants with a couple of kids involved. But however this ends up being, it's just the worst event planning you could imagine. It was the fire festival on steroids with a holy flare.
Oh, the minute you said the worst event planning you could imagine, I was like, this is a rave gone sideways. Like,
Yeah,
yeah,
too much
yeah,
ecstasy,
okay.
not enough water, and the music isn't that great.
Also, it's 112 degrees outside. Yeah.
But that train wreck is the Children's Crusade of 1212.
I hate that for us. You know?
I'm nothing if not consistent with my choice of stories.
Truly, you are a genius in at work. Out here telling the world the stuff that we need to go wash our ear holes out of. You know?
Misery is my paintbrush.
Your art is fantastic. I'm happy to be your curator, the collector of your information, if you will,
Mm,
or the recipient of your information, rather.
the
I'm happy
trash
to be your
receptacle of my
patron. I'm your patron. Thanks for the fine work you do.
butt of goals.
But of course, I am here for you always. Oh, that was. I didn't know a single word of that. And I still don't like that it formed a sentence that made sense. Um, well done. Well done. I don't even know how to segue, so I'm just gonna segue. What do you think?
I'm here for it.
All right. Um, Man, I don't know how to tell you my sources without just telling this. You know what? I'm not gonna tell you. I'm just gonna tell you my main sources are the Smithsonian. How about that?
That could
Twice, in
go
fact.
so many places.
I know, I'm really proud of myself. I also need you to know that I looked up national parks. They did not have, I don't have a source from national parks today,
So we have a hole in
sadly.
our content, national parks. Please listen to this and understand that you have the ability to do better.
You could help us out here. That being said, my guy was born in Hosting, which is in 1890. This is part of the Austria-Hungarian Empire. Today it would be in the Czech Republic. His name, well, he says his name is Victor Lustig or Count Victor Lustig, or maybe it's Robert V. Miller. Was
I'm
he
going to
the
go with the
son?
boring one.
I don't know, we'll see. Was he the wealthy son of one Ludwig, descended from royalty even, who happened to be the burgomaster or mayor of the town? Or was he a lowly peasant boy? We'll likely never know. That said, that later prison documents state his father and mother as the poorest peasant people who raised him in a grim house made from stone. Mr. Lustig is the name that he goes by for the bulk of this story, so his name is always Lustig, in my opinion. His associates at the time say that by his teenage years in the early 1900s, Lustig was already busy climbing up the corporate, and by corporate I mean corrupt, criminal ladder. He spent his youth as a panhandler, a pickpocket, a thief, and a street hustler. Though he says he, quote, stole to survive, but only from the greedy and dishonest. Now,
And
here's
how
where
did
it's
he
very
know?
interesting. Well, how did he know? There's many questions here. So he could also speak several languages, including Czech, English, German, Italian. I find his our lack of knowledge about his early years really interesting, and the fact that it's most likely he is just from a lowly, peasant type village. I love that he learned several languages in his early lifetime.
You know,
It's
and language learning is
baffling to
like
me.
one of those things that we kind of frown upon if you're of the low class. But if you are rich and you speak two, three, five languages, we're fascinated by.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's intriguing to me that he is likely from a lower class, but he is very worldly, if you will. He's suave, he's debonair, he wears beautiful, expensive clothes. He always appears poised and one could say serene in every situation. He is the stuff of movie and intrigue legend. What makes him particularly interesting to me is when I say suave and debonair, in my mind, I picture like Laurence Olivier, right? Of this time
Okay.
frame. Like you're looking at the Clark Gables. That's what I picture in my mind when you hear suave and debonair. But Lustig is described more as shorter, maybe a little stern looking in the face, not your typical Hollywood dreamboat. But
Okay.
I think that works to his benefit because he is so unassuming and so categorically gracious and, like I said before, serene that you just have to assume he is who he says he is.
So, okay, he's gracious and unassuming, but he's very stern looking. So he's got a resting bitch face.
I think that is how I would imagine it, but stern looking in that, like, when you think of like the Clark Gables of the day and the Fred Astaire's and all these, just heartthrob type characters from his time frame, you imagine that type of face. His face doesn't match theirs. And I'll show
Okay.
you a photo of him later so you can kind of understand where I'm going with. All that to say, True Detective Mysteries magazine, which was published from the years 1924 to 1995, says that he had perfected every card trick known to man. It also goes on to say that by adulthood, he could make a deck of cards do everything but talk. One could say he could do it all.
Okay. So, yeah, he's obviously a swindler, a multilingual
Yes,
swindler. As soon as we get to the card tricks, you're either doing birthday parties or taking millions out of people's pockets.
you're on the right track. Lustig is nothing if not a surveyor of mankind and has a real keen understanding of human nature, and it didn't take long for him to start putting together how he could swindle the hell out of everyone very quickly. Also, as I mentioned before, he's fluent in several languages. And he thought to himself, you know what? There's no better way to make some good money than from wealthy travelers. And since, hey, you know what? I want to see the world, there might, like, the best way to go about this might be on an ocean liner. So
This is given
he's
some catch me
cunning.
if you can vibes.
It's truly I catch me if you can guy and this guy had a lot in common. Remember, he's cunning, he's charming, he's poised, and he knows how to work a room. And by this point, it's the early 20s when many people had more money than sense, right? So he boards an ocean liner and he starts making small talk with all the successful businessmen around him. He's looking for a mark. specifically the perfect mark. And in the midst of all his chit-chatting, the talk would always turn to his wealth. And he would say, kind of reluctantly, but with all the confidence in the world, that he has been using a money box. Air quotes. Eventually, after I'm sure some pleading on the part of the other men, because there's one thing rich men love more than money, that would be more money, right?
Right.
Eventually, he agrees to show the machine privately, of course. Um,
I think I
and
know
after all,
a tiny bit of this. This is ringing some bells.
it's gonna
Carry
keep
on.
ringing bells then, okay? So, I mean, of course he's traveling with it. Why wouldn't you travel with your money-making machine, right? So this box looks kind of like a small steamer trunk. It's crafted of mahogany, but it's outfitted with this sophisticated looking printing machine within. The Smithsonian says, quote, Lustig would demonstrate the money box by inserting an authentic $100 bill, and after a few hours, quite possibly up to 6 hours, of chemical processing, he'd extract two seemingly authentic $100 bills. He had no trouble passing them aboard the ship. You can imagine that it wasn't long before his wealthy new friends would be asking how they too might be able to come into possession of a money box. Always reluctantly, the Count would consider selling the box if the price was right, and it wasn't uncommon for several potential buyers to bid against one another over several days at sea. So this man has the long con down. He's patient and he's super cautious. He would usually end up agreeing to, by the end of the voyage, of course, selling the device for a sum of $10,000, sometimes 2 or 3 times that amount. He would pack the machine with several $100 bills, and after any last minute suspicions had been put to rest through all sorts of successful test runs, the Count would simply disappear, leaving you with your $10,000 box of gears. Or more, perhaps $30,000 box of gears. This is only be the beginning of his success. By 1925, Lustig has made it to Paris. After having arrived, he reads a newspaper story that talked about how the Eiffel Tower was rusting and there's a high cost of maintenance and repairs.
Oh,
Does this ring
yes.
a bell?
Yes.
Okay. So at this point, Parisians are sort of divided in their opinion of what should be done with it. Since it was built in 1889 for the Paris Exposition, it's already a decade past its lifespan, or what they projected to be its lifespan. And there was quite a lot that thought it should be taken down. About this time, Lustig's wheels start spinning, and he comes up with a plan that would make him an absolute legend. He starts looking into all the metal scrap dealers in Paris. Then he sends out letters on fake stationery containing a really official looking French government seal. And I just laughed at that, thinking this was clearly before phishing scam training was out.
Yeah, they
So
haven't gotten
anyway,
that email yet.
no, they have not. They definitely were clicking the link on him. So anyway, he's claiming to be the deputy director of the Ministry des Postes and Telegraphs, and he is requesting meetings with the scrap metal fellas that he thinks will be perfect marks. He tells them all that he has this project that might prove really lucrative for them. But as such, the meetings, according to him, needed to be absolutely discreet, right? Like silent, shh, meet me in the back room. We cannot let this out because it's just that lucrative. He's holding these meetings with the scrap dealers at the Hotel de Crillon, in which is one of Paris's most upscale and gorgeous hotels. He tells them that a decision has been made from the authorities to take bids, with the winner attaining the rights to demolish the tower and take possession of 7,000 tons of metal.
Jeez.
Because of, quote, engineering faults, costly repairs, and political problems, I cannot discuss the tearing down of the Eiffel Tower has become mandatory. So he is just playing them like a fiddle. He rents limousines, he gives tours of the towers, all to pick his mark. Proof, in my opinion, that walking in like you own the place actually works,
Yeah.
right? I mean, the perfect mark turns out to be a man called Andre Poussin, He's new to the city, and Lustig quickly decides he's the guy for him. Husan begins asking all sorts of questions, right? And Lustig feeds right into it. He says basically, as a public official, I don't really earn much money, blah, blah, blah. And finding a buyer for the Eiffel Tower, well, it's a very big decision. Poussin takes the bait, hook, line, and sinker. He's been in Paris long enough to know that this bureaucrat must be legitimate. I mean, who else is going to insinuate a bribe, right? So Poussin decides to pay Lustig 20,000 in cash plus an additional 50,000 if, Lustig could see to it that his bet or his bid gets the winning
This
contract,
is
right?
this is so good. This is so good.
Right? It takes Lustig less than an hour to secure $70,000. Okay, so because we love this, that 70,000 American dollars today would be over a million.
Ugh,
Yeah. So there's that.
I wouldn't be
He,
able to keep a straight face for that much money.
dude, I don't know how he's keeping it together himself. Like, I personally would be scared to death that somebody would have figured me out by now. But
Ma'am, you're drooling and you've peed yourself. Are you fine?
the peeing myself is really quite very much my fear. So he takes the cash and he immediately starts on his way back to Austria, where he waits it out, for the story to break. He's wondering if maybe once the story breaks, there might be a description or a sketch of himself. But the news never breaks. Poussin is fearful of the embarrassment and other ramifications. He never reports Lustig's scam.
This is straight
So,
Doris Payne, but at a bigger level, where Doris
but
Payne's
with the
marks
Eiffel
would just
Tower.
not report her because they didn't want their insurance to go up.
Right. Lustig takes the whole news is good news thing and like really, that sinks into his heart in all the right ways, and he's totally emboldened by it. And so he tries it again. He heads back to Paris a second time to give it another go. Remember though, the Count, he's a bit of a student of human nature and begins to suspect pretty quick that one of the new dealers he's working with has notified the police. So he packs up and leaves. By this time, he decides he's going to make his way to the US, where he goes back to the tried and true money box scheme because, again, more money than sense. Here in the US, he would assume dozens of aliases and multiple passports, so it's possible and likely that the Robert V. Miller name is one of his fake names. It was definitely one of his aliases for sure, probably not his actual name. He managed to piss people off like everywhere he goes. And by piss people off, I mean he relieves them of his money, of their money. There are more than 40 cases against him that he somehow manages to elude any sort of punishment for, and he escapes jail while waiting trial. Coincidentally, it happens to be the same jail that John Dillinger had bolted from, which I think is really hilarious.
Oh,
Like, maybe we should look into making this a
maybe
little
that
more gel-like.
that jail needs bars on the windows.
Maybe we should close the doors. I'm unclear, but so there's that. He is known to have swindled a Texas sheriff as well as a county tax collector out of $123,000 in tax receipts using the old money box gambit. So I didn't look up what the translation is, but if 70,000 is over a million,
Uh, that's
yeah,
that's enough that you're going to need to overthrow an empire for. If I lost that much money, it's game over. It's game over.
yeah. It's time to wage war. Um The sheriff tracks him down in Chicago, where the Count quite literally talks his way out of trouble, blaming the sheriff. He says it's the sheriff's fault because he was inexperienced with the machine, and he returns a large sum of cash to him. So he basically gets out of this like scot-free, right?
So he basically just, have you heard the term picnic? Problem in
No.
chair, not in computer.
There you go. Yeah, we call that a loose nut behind the wheel.
Mm.
Yeah. So while in Chicago, he meets Al Capone, to whom he says he needs $50,000 to finance a scam and promises to repay the gangster double the money in only 2 months.
This sounds like
Capone,
a bad deal.
dude, could not agree with you more. Capone is super suspicious about the whole thing, but he hands him the money anyway. Lustig, in a moment of sheer genius, um, of who absolutely did not piss off, stuffs the money in a safe in his room and returns it to him like 2 months later, saying that the scam he had planned had gone very sideways, but that he wanted to come and repay the loan. Capone is relieved and impressed with Lustig, so, his honesty and all that. So he just hands him $5,000.
Dang.
Lustig never intended to use the money for anything other than to gain Capone's trust. And all I gotta say is that's ballsy as hell. Like, I'm sorry, you took that back and you put it in your safe and it sat there for 2 months and you never thought Capone might have any questions in that 2 months about how your scam's going?
I have a feeling it wasn't as simple as I'm just going to do this. This is the long game. He thought about that for a while because he's like, I could leave town. And then it was, no, that's Capone.
Right, exactly. So in 1930, Lustig sets up a counterfeiting operation with a chemist named Tom Shaw. They're using plates, paper, and ink that the ink is that tiny, oh my gosh, that emulates the tiny red and green threads that would be in a real $100 bill.
Yeah.
They set up this super elaborate, super detailed distribution system that literally pushes out more than 100, excuse me, I believe it is more than 10,000 a month. I think I added a zero. And they use couriers who don't know at all that it's counterfeit cash. Well, later that same year, these bills are circulating. They are now well circulated and they are showing up all over the country. The Secret Service gets wind of it and arrests the Texas sheriff that Lustig had previously swindled. I
Oh my
love this
gosh.
for him.
That is such a bad day
Can you
for that
imagine?
man.
Right? The Secret Service accuses him of passing counterfeit bills in New Orleans. Like, what are the odds? I'm
I,
assuming he is not winning, right? At this point, the sheriff is sufficiently pissed and he gives the agents a description of Count Lustig, but still goes to prison nonetheless.
oh,
They pass out so much counterfeit money that the authorities, between all of his counterfeiting schemes, because there's another one that he gets into later, between his counterfeiting schemes, the authorities fear the amount of money he's able to work with is actually going to upend our economy and cause the international market to not trust the American dollar.
all right,
Like,
Mansa Musa.
they're, yeah, they've got concerns. Well, about this time, a one Miss Billy May, who is Luke's girlfriend, finds out he is probably having an affair with Tom Shaw, his business partner's mistress. Like, what a love circle that is. So she makes an anonymous call because she's petty as hell to the police and tells them where the Count was staying in New York City.
Yes, girl.
Right? So, so right about the time Lustig gets into the whole counterfeiting business, he happens to fall into the sights of one Secret Service agent called Peter A. Rubano, and he makes it his life goal to catch Lustig. However, Lustig teams up with gangland forger William Watts and creates banknotes so flawless they fool even tellers. A judge would later comment on the bills, saying, quote, like some other government issuing money in rivalry with the United States Treasury. Like that's how good they were,
Dang.
right? Rubano, the Secret Service, and Lustig play a lovely long game of cat and mouse, so much so that Lustig feels it necessary to travel with a trunk of disguises. At any given moment, he can be a rabbi, a bellhop, a priest, maybe even a porter. Being dressed like a porter or bellhop, he could escape any hotel he was in a pinch and take his luggage with him.
Well
But he
done.
thought it through. I'm picturing Brad Pitt, all a snatch, wearing the rabbi gear, you know? His downfall would, of course, be greed and overconfidence, in my opinion. Finally, he's found on a New York street corner, May 10th, 1935. Lustig hears and feels a pull on the collar of his coat to hear the words, hands in the air. Agent Rubano had him away in cuffs. It was a very short-lived victory for the feds, though, because the Smithsonian says, and I quote, as he awaited trial, Lustig playfully bragged that no prison could hold him. On the day before his trial was to begin, dressed in prison-issued dungaree, I can never say this word, dungarees and
Dungarees.
slippers. I don't know why I have such a hard time with it. And slippers, he fashioned several bed sheets into a rope and slipped out the window of the federal detention headquarters of Lower Manhattan. Pretending to be a window washer, he casually wipes at windows as he shimmies down the building. Dozens of passers-by saw him, and they apparently thought nothing of it. When he gets to the bottom of the building, he gives his audience a polite bow and then sprints away, quote, like a deer, excuse me, like a door,
I'm about to say, I've
like a
never
deer.
sprinted like a door.
They just fall.
Yeah. Open,
Yeah,
close.
think Harry Potter. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah. He sprints away like a deer as the police and the correctional officers, they're racing to his cell, right? When they get there, they discover a handwritten note on his pillow, and it's an excerpt from Les Miserables. Shall I read you the quote
Yes.
that he left them? He allowed himself to be led in a promise. Jean Valjean had his promise, even to a convict, especially to a convict. It may give the convict confidence and guide him on the right path. Law was not made by God, and man can be wrong. Lustig manages to evade recapture until Saturday, September 28th of the same year, 1935.
How
So
long
that
was he
day
out?
is a few months. However, he's in Pittsburgh, and Lustig is being watched by an FBI agent named, and this is so 1930s G-Man. The FBI agent is named G.K. Firestone.
Oh, yeah, no, that's I've read that comic book.
Right? Firestone sees him get into a vehicle, at which point he gives the signal to a Pittsburgh Secret Service agent, Fred Gruber, and I almost died because all I could think of was Hans Gruber, and it just made me laugh so
Who was
hard.
Hans Gruber?
A Pittsburgh Secret Service agent, but his name is Fred Gruber, but I could only think of Die Hard. Hans Gruber, the
Oh, I
villain.
should have known that. Yep. Okay. Sorry. I was
Yeah.
like, I'm missing a reference. I didn't get there.
I
Anyhow,
do apologize.
no,
So
that
anyway,
was
the two
my mistake.
feds, these guys, they jump in the car and a pursuit begins. The next 9 blocks, the vehicles, they're like neck and neck with each other. Engines are roaring, all kinds of stuff is happening. This is what you would imagine an old gangster movie to look like. However, when Lustig's driver refuses to stop, the agents use their car as a ram and they lock their wheels together. Sparks are flying, the cars crash, and the great chase comes to an end. The agents pull out their weapons and they throw open the door. The Pittsburgh Post Gazette says this. Lustig gets out, looks at his captors, and says, well, boys, here I am.
And can I just
And
say that driver gets 5 stars and a tip?
I truly, truly, I mean, he really gave it his all.
He understood the assignment.
He did. He went all out with it. And I'm going to share the next quote with you verbatim because I find it really interesting. Count Victor Lustig was hauled before the judge in New York in November of 1935. His pale, lean face was as sturdy, and his tapering white hands rested on the bar before the bench. This is observed by a reporter for the New York Herald Tribune. Just before sentencing, another journalist overhears a Secret Service agent tell Lustig, Count, you're the smoothest con man that ever lived.
High
Additional stories
praise.
go on to say,
Do you
right?
get that on your
The
resume?
Count, I know, I was thinking the same thing, right? The Count politely responds with a smile on his face. I wouldn't say that. After all, you have conned me. Well, things don't go great for his charm in the courtroom, and he gets himself sent all the way to Alcatraz because the previous holdings did not work. Prison guards search Lustig's body for any kind of concealed watch springs, razor blades, the whole bit, and they hose him down with freezing cold seawater.
Oof.
And then, to a chorus of whistling and howls and all the catcalling you can do, cups clanging against the bars, they march him along the main corridors, the Broadway, if you will, very naked. Lugstig's prison record said he, quote, he is somewhat superficially humiliated. They go on to say he asserts that he was accused of everything in the category of crime, including the burning of Chicago.
I
And I
thought we
just
were going
find
to
that,
say that he asserts, I'm a grower, not a shower.
I mean,
I'm cold and I
you
am
know,
naked. Do not judge.
I am not happy about this. It's cold outside. The prison refers to him by the last name of Miller or simply prisoner number 300. By December 7, 1946, so now we're at 11 years, Lustig has already made at least 1,192 medical requests and filled 507 prescriptions. The prison guards believe he is faking it and that the sickness he's claiming he has is just part of another elaborate ruse, another escape plan. After all, they did find torn bed sheets in his cell. Perhaps his plan was to escape the same way again. Additionally, afterwards, medical reports say that Lustig was, quote, inclined to magnify physical complaints and constantly complaining of real and or imaginary ills. He was eventually transferred to a secure medical facility in Springfield, Missouri. The doctors there find out immediately he is in fact not faking, and there he would die from complications arising from pneumonia.
Oh,
One of the Smithsonian articles says this about his death of complications. We may never know the true identity of Count Victor Lustig, but we do know for certain that he's the world's most flamboyant con man died at 8:30 p.m. on March 11th, 1947. On his death certificate, a clerk wrote for this occupation, apprentice salesman. Do you know how quick I would come back to haunt somebody if they put that down as my occupation after the life I've lived?
yeah, that does seem just to piss him off.
Like, why couldn't you just put con man? I don't understand. That was clearly his job.
Failed millionaire, even.
I know, at least give him something. Apprentice sell what? No, no, no. If he's selling anything, he's done it, you know? So that's the story of Victor Lustig. I do have a little comment. Another Secret Service agent by the name of Brent Seckler said Victor Lustig was a top man in the modern world of crime. He was the only one I ever heard of who swindled the law.
Which is just brilliant. And it's proof that
Brilliant,
anybody is fallible, right?
right? Okay, um here's my images, some of my images of him, so you can kind of see why I'm not saying he's exactly the Clark Gable type,
Okay,
but
so
how easily he could pull off being someone of uh, aristocratic birth.
I could see, okay, you put anybody in a nice, okay, look at the Habsburgs. That was aristocratic
Mm-hmm.
birth.
Yeah. I mean, look at the jawline. Think of
No,
the
he's
chin.
got a
He
good
might be
jawline.
Habsburg.
Yeah, he does have a very, I could say debonair. If you get him, because not his mugshot, but the other one, he's got a
He does.
smoldering,
And in
you know
these
what I mean?
hats, yeah.
Well, I mean, look, he can rock a hat. He could be
Mm-hmm.
in like just elbow to elbow with Al Capone.
Right? Here's some images of the money box.
I mean, so Angie's showing
Exactly
me,
as described.
Yeah, like it is literally a wooden box with what looks like a money printer. And it
Mm-hmm.
looks like there is money underneath it.
Yeah, like stuffed in the bottom of it. I'm unclear what that's supposed to mean, but it made me laugh. And if you're curious, this is the hotel in Paris where he had his top secret
Okay, so it
rust
is,
selling meetings.
I would say it's 1 star because it's probably 20-foot ceilings, just bedecked in gold leaf. And
Mm-hmm.
it's what you imagine if you're watching a period piece in France.
Yeah, exactly. 100%. So that's my romping, completely unhinged. I sold the Eiffel Tower at least one time and got away with it. Not only did I sell it, I got away with selling it.
And that just goes to prove that he couldn't quit while he was ahead.
Truly, he
There
could
were
not.
so many opportunities for him to just find himself a villa in the south of France with 200 acres and just set himself up.
Or think of the ability he had to market. Like, he could have made it really big in the actual working world, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's Count Lustig for you. And I had read his story some years ago, but somehow completely forgot about it until the husband was like, babe, did you forget about? And so I had to circle back and do him quite fast.
Well, I'm here for it. And I know I've heard
Yes,
like at least bits and pieces of his story, but it's a good story. And I didn't have it top of mind, so I'm here for it.
I loved it. It made my whole day, my whole weekend, if you will.
Well, I'm here for it. And I'm grateful that you shared it because now I'm going to go regurgitate it to Hubs and he's going to be maybe as thrilled. But at least he's done hearing about the Children's Crusade. So I've got that
No,
going
now
for
I
me.
get to go pass that information on, so I'm excited about that.
I know. Hey, so charismatic 12-year-olds. Hey, 16-year-olds,
Oh,
you're sleeping on it. Where's your 30,000 followers?
I- I'll
When's the
have to
last
check his
time
Instagram.
you had an audience with the King of France?
No, truly, huh? Get on it. I would like an audience with the King of France. As we speak right now, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna look up what his how many followers on Instagram he has just for the sake of storytelling.
We don't need to out him here.
I'm not going to. I'm curious for my own self.
Okay.
Oh,
Well, if you are curious for your own selves on what we're going to be bringing next week, heaven help us, because we may not even know. Rate, review, subscribe, and tell us to your favorite Instagram follower. We all have one. And on
we
that
do.
note, goodbye.
Bye bye.